07.42 hours, 23rd October 1942, 8 kilometers north of El Alamein, Egypt. The British 8th Army's artillery batteries tracked German Panzer formations across open desert. Expected attrition rate, 12% per engagement. Recorded result, 37% in the opening barrage. War Diary, 51st Highland Division, notes a firing adjustment at 07:43 that deviated from standard procedure but achieved exceptional effect. The gunner's name appears once in the margin. No commendation followed. The trajectory calculations were filed, studied, then quietly adopted across 3 artillery regiments by November. In the smoke and mathematics of that morning, something shifted. The pattern wasn't authorized, but the numbers were undeniable. On the morning of 23rd October 1942, Corporal John Harper of the 51st Highland Division's Royal Artillery stood beside his 25-pounder gun emplacement as the sun climbed over the western desert. The metal already radiated heat. Sand worked into every mechanism, every seam of clothing, every breath. Harper had been a surveyor in Aberdeen before enlistment, accustomed to angles and elevations. Now those skills translated to firing solutions across broken terrain. The regiment had moved into position during the night, part of Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery's carefully orchestrated build-up. Over 1,000 artillery pieces stretched along the Allied line. Harper's battery, positioned in the northern sector, faced the 21st Panzer Division's anticipated advance route. Intelligence reports indicated enemy armor concentration 3 kilometers distant. Radio protocols required confirmation before engagement. The waiting pressed against the chest like the heat itself. Around Harper, the gun crew moved through preparation rituals. Ammunition stacked in prescribed order, elevation mechanisms checked. Sighting calibrated. Lance Bombardier William Ross, the layer, crouched at the sight mount, calling corrections in the clipped vernacular of artillery procedure. Sergeant Duncan MacLeod supervised from 5 meters back. His field glasses trained on the horizon. The desert shimmered. Distance collapsed and expanded in the heat waves. At 07:30, the first dust plumes appeared. German reconnaissance vehicles, then the heavier signatures of Panzer IIIs and EVs. MacLeod relayed coordinates. Harper's hands moved across the traverse and elevation wheels. The mathematics was simple: range, angle, windage. But the standard firing pattern, rapid salvos at fixed intervals, assumed level ground and predictable advance. The terrain here rolled in subtle folds, depressions where armor could shelter between volleys. Harper hesitated. The surveyor's instinct saw the ground differently. Colonel Dieter Kraus commanded the lead elements of the 21st Panzer Division from his Panzer IV command tank. At 41, he'd fought in Poland and France, understood the rhythms of armoured warfare. The Western Desert Campaign differed from European theatres. Here, space dominated. Supply lines stretched, water determined movement as much as fuel. His division had been blooded at Gazala, understood British defensive doctrine. The morning advance followed standard procedure. Panzer IIIs formed the spearhead, their 50mm guns effective against most Allied armour. The Panzer IVs, including Kraus's command vehicle, provided heavier support with 75mm main guns. Behind them, motorized infantry in half tracks. The formation moved at 15 kilometers per hour, maintaining intervals for mutual support. Radio discipline held firm. Each commander knew his sector, his responsibility. Kraus scanned the British positions through field glasses, artillery emplacements visible as dark shapes against sand. No movement yet. Standard procedure dictated suppressive fire once his tanks reached effective range. The British would respond with their own barrage, But German armor doctrine emphasized speed and maneuver, close the distance, accept casualties, break through. His radio crackled. Condor 1, this is Condor 3. Enemy artillery preparation observed, multiple batteries. Kraus acknowledged, expected. The British always telegraphed their intentions. He ordered spread formation, increased intervals, harder targets, more ground covered. The engines roared. Inside the tank, the heat built despite open hatches, fuel smell mixed with oil and cordite residue. His crew, driver, radio operator, gunner, loader, moved with practiced efficiency. The first British shells landed 200 meters ahead. The barrage pattern emerged. Walking fire, standard suppression technique. Kraus smiled grimly. Predictable. His tanks could navigate through it. He keyed the radio. All units, maintain speed. Prepare for close engagement. The morning had just begun. At 07:43, Harper made his adjustment. Instead of the prescribed rapid-fire pattern, he calculated a longer trajectory with delayed timing. The 25-pounder's maximum range exceeded 12,000 meters, but effective accuracy dropped beyond 9,000. Harper's target lay at 8,200 meters. Standard doctrine called for high-angle plunging fire. He chose a flatter trajectory, lower angle, increased propellant charge. Ross looked up from the sight. That's not the setting called. I know, Harper said. His hands steady now. The mathematics clear. The flat trajectory meant the shell would arrive milliseconds faster, but more importantly, would strike at a different angle against sloped armor. The Panzer III's frontal plates could deflect high-angle hits. A flatter approach changed the physics. Sergeant McLeod's voice cut through. Harper, you have firing solution? Aye, Sergeant. Then fire for effect. The 25-pounder bucked. The breech slammed back. Cordite smoke billowed. The crew moved immediately into reload sequence. Harper didn't watch the shell's flight, already calculating the next adjustment. 30 seconds to reload, another 30 for the shell's flight time. He counted. At 58 seconds, the distant explosion, different sound from a near miss, sharper, metal on metal. Through field glasses, McLeod watched the lead Panzer shudder, smoke, then flame. Good Christ, he muttered. Again, Harper. Same setting. The second round fired at 07:44. Another hit, then a third. The pattern emerged not from doctrine, but from observation. Harper fired between the standard intervals, caught the advancing Panzers as they maneuvered between predicted impact points. The unauthorized timing created gaps in their evasive movement. By 07:50, 4 German tanks burned. The advance slowed. Radio traffic increased across the British line. Artillery observers noted the firing pattern, called corrections to neighbouring batteries. Someone was doing something different, and it worked. Major Peter Grimshaw, Royal Artillery, observed the engagement from his command post 300 metres behind the gun line. At 34, he'd learned artillery procedure at Larkhill, commanded batteries in France during the 1940 withdrawal. Experience taught him doctrine existed for good reason, but experience also taught him results mattered more than method. He watched Harper's gun through binoculars. The firing rhythm was wrong, definitely wrong, but the impacts were right, unmistakably right. Around him, his staff tracked the engagement on plotting tables. German formation disrupted, advance rate declining, casualty assessment moderate to heavy. The telephone rang, brigade headquarters. Grimshaw here. He listened, eyes still on the battlefield. Yes, sir. 51st batteries. Particularly effective this morning. Pause. I'm observing it now, sir. Unorthodox timing pattern. Another pause. Understood. We'll document for after-action review. He replaced the handset. The observation officer, Lieutenant Chambers, looked up. "Sir? Brigade wants details on our firing procedure, specifically the adjustments." "Harper's not following the fire plan." "I'm aware." Grimshaw lowered the binoculars. "But count the burning Panzers, then count ours." They both knew. None. Not yet, anyway. Across the engagement zone, other British batteries maintained standard procedure, effective, professional, doctrine compliant. Harper's gun created a measurable difference. The mathematics were emerging in real time. Standard salvos achieved 12% hit rates at this range. Harper's adjusted pattern, 37% through the first 15 minutes. Grimshaw made his decision. He walked to Harper's position. The crew worked smoothly now, confidence building. MacLeod saw him approach, started to call attention. Grimshaw waved him off. Watched the crew complete another loading sequence. Watched Harper's hands on the controls, the surveyor's precision, the non-standard approach. "Carry on," Grimshaw said quietly. "Whatever you're doing, Corporal, carry on." Harper nodded, fired again. The pattern held. Inside Panzer 214, Krauss reassessed. 4. Tanks destroyed in 12 minutes. Casualties higher than anticipated. The British artillery demonstrated unusual accuracy, not the scattered suppression fire expected, focused, precise, timed to exploit movement patterns. Someone on the British side understood armoured tactics. He ordered formation change, wider intervals, irregular advance. The tanks moved in bounds, some stationary providing cover while others advanced. Standard counter-battery procedure. It worked in theory. In practice, the British fire adapted. The strange timing pattern continued to find targets. Another Panzer III exploded, its ammunition cooking off in secondary detonations. Krauss's radio operator, Corporal Schmidt, monitored multiple frequencies. "Herr Oberst, other sectors report standard British firing patterns. Only our sector shows this precision." "Interesting," Krauss considered. "A single battery, a single gun. Possible, if improbable. Modern warfare functioned through systems, not individuals. Mass and coordination determined outcomes, yet the evidence accumulated. 7 tanks now. 8. The advance stalled at 0815, 2 kilometers short of the initial objective. He radioed division headquarters, reported contact, casualties, the anomalous firing pattern. The response came within minutes. Continue advance, artillery support being coordinated. That meant German 88mm guns would begin counter-battery fire. They'd locate the troublesome British position, eliminate it, standard procedure. Krauss relayed orders. His Panzers would push forward during the suppression window. The British couldn't maintain their accuracy under counterfire. Basic tactical logic. He checked his map. 2 kilometers to break through the artillery zone, then the British infantry positions, then open desert beyond. Operational freedom. His loader, young Schütze Hoffmann, glanced back. 20 years old, face streaked with sweat and oil. "Herr Oberst, are we advancing?" "We are." Krauss kept his voice steady. Leadership meant confidence. 10 minutes, then we move. Outside, the British shells continued falling. The unusual pattern persisted. Krauss noticed his hands gripping the map harder than necessary. He relaxed them, waited. By 0830, ammunition consumption at Harper's position exceeded projections by 40%. Standard engagement protocols allocated 60 rounds per hour per gun. Harper's gun had fired 97 rounds in 50 minutes. The barrel radiated heat, despite attempts to cool it. The crew worked faster now, muscle memory overriding fatigue. Ross called corrections between shots. MacLeod directed target selection. But Harper controlled the rhythm, each firing solution calculated individually. No pattern identical to the previous. He adapted to German movements, anticipated their next positions, the surveyor's skill, reading terrain, understanding how forces flowed across landscape. The other guns in the battery maintained standard procedure, effective, professional, but Harper's position accounted for 63% of confirmed kills. The mathematics created questions. After-action reviews would examine them, but in the moment, only results mattered. At 08:35, German counter-battery fire began. The 80mm guns had excellent range, legendary accuracy. Shells screamed overhead, seeking British positions. The first impacts landed 300 meters north. Walking fire, systematic search, standard German procedure. Harper's crew kept working. Fire, reload, fire. The pattern held. Major Grimshaw watched the German shells creep closer. Doctrine required dispersal under counter-battery fire, relocate guns to alternate positions, but relocation meant cessation of fire. The German tanks would advance during the gap. He made the calculation, ordered the other guns to displace. Harper's gun would maintain position, maintain fire, calculated risk. The crew understood. No one spoke about it. They moved faster. Another round. Another. The German armour advance had stalled completely now. Krauss's formation held position behind a low ridge, seeking cover, waiting for their artillery to clear the path. The next German 80mm shell landed 70 meters away. Sand and smoke erupted. Fragments hummed through the air. Harper didn't flinch. Adjusted elevation. Fired. The distant Panzer erupted. 13 confirmed now. The unauthorized pattern had become a method. The method had become survival. At division headquarters, 12 kilometers behind the German front line, Major Wilhelm Becker studied situation reports. As intelligence officer, he tracked patterns. The 21st Panzer Division's advance had stalled. Casualties, 17 tanks. Unusual, very unusual. British artillery typically achieved lower effectiveness against manoeuvring armour. He examined the after-action reports filed by surviving tank commanders, multiple mentions of irregular firing intervals. Unexpected impact timing. One commander noted shells arriving. In the gaps between our evasive movements, Becker underlined that phrase. Someone on the British side had identified a vulnerability in standard German armour tactics. He walked to the operations map, marked the engagement zone, cross-referenced with intelligence assessments of British artillery positions. The report suggested a single battery, possibly a single gun, demonstrated the exceptional accuracy. Becker had served in Poland, France, Russia. He understood warfare's nature. Occasionally, individuals created disproportionate effects. A skilled sniper, an exceptional pilot, rarely an artilleryman who understood both mathematics and intuition. He recommended concentrated counter-battery fire on the identified grid coordinates. The 80mm batteries could eliminate the position, standard solution to uncommon problems, but privately, Becker felt curiosity. What kind of training produced such skill? What circumstances created such innovation under fire? The telephone interrupted his thoughts. Operations officer requesting updated intelligence briefing. Becker gathered his notes. The battle continued. Individual skill or not, the division needed to advance. Rommel's offensive schedule allowed no delays. They would eliminate the troublesome gun position. They would break through. The machine would overcome the individual. Yet walking to the briefing room, Becker considered the reports again. 17 tanks, 1 gun. The mathematics defied doctrine. In his briefcase, he carried a notebook for observations. That evening, he would write, October 23rd, El Alamein sector. Enemy demonstrated tactical innovation at tactical level. Individual initiative overcame standard procedure. Note for future training assessment. He filed it. The war moved on. At 09 Zuril, the German 88mm barrage intensified. The crews had refined their targeting. Shells impacted within 50 meters of Harper's position now. Each explosion showered the emplacement with sand and stone fragments. The 25-pounder's shield provided frontal protection, but fragmentation came from all angles. The crew worked through it. Lance Bombardier Ross took shrapnel in his left shoulder at 0907. Clean wound, through and through. He refused evacuation, tied a field, dressing himself, returned to the sight mount. "Can still see," he said, "can still call corrections." McLeod watched the German armour position. They hadn't advanced. Waiting for artillery to finish its work. Smart. Patient. But patience cost time. Time allowed British reinforcements to arrive, positions to strengthen. The longer Krauss waited, the stronger the defence became. The equation favoured the British now. Harper fired his 143rd round at 09:12. The barrel glowed despite cooling attempts. The breech mechanisms strained. British 25-pounders were robust designs, but sustained fire at this rate exceeded engineering parameters. Metal fatigued. Tolerances shifted. Harper compensated, adjusting for barrel wear, changing trajectories. Another German shell landed 30 meters away. The concussion knocked Harper sideways. He steadied himself against the trail, ears ringing. Checked the sight mount, still aligned. Checked the crew. Everyone still functional. He nodded to the loader. The next round chambered. Major Grimshaw, from his command post, watched the German fire concentrate on Harper's position. The mathematics were clear. The position couldn't survive much longer, but it had held for 90 minutes. 90 minutes that had stopped an entire Panzer division. Tactical doctrine would call that acceptable loss ratio, but Grimshaw didn't think in abstractions. He thought in names. Harper, Ross, McLeod, the other crew members. He reached for the field telephone, prepared the evacuation order, hesitated. On the battlefield, Harper fired again. 19 confirmed kills now. At 09:25, everything changed, not because of tactical brilliance or individual courage, but because of logistics. Harper's ammunition stocks reached critical levels. The standard allocation, 60 rounds per gun for a 4-hour engagement, hadn't anticipated his firing rate. The battery ammunition lorry, positioned 400 meters behind the gun line, had been struck by counter-battery fire at 09:18. Secondary explosions consumed the remaining stocks. McLeod ran to Grimshaw's command post, reported the situation, no ammunition reserves immediately available, resupply convoy en route, but estimated arrival, 10 hours, 35 minutes. Grimshaw did the mathematics instantly, 35 minutes of unopposed German advance. He made the decision, ordered Harper's gun to cease fire, ordered the crew to evacuate to secondary positions. Doctrine and humanity aligned. You don't sacrifice men for barren guns. Harper, Ross, and the crew received the order at 09:27. They prepared to withdraw, disabled the breach mechanism per procedure, preventing enemy use if the position was overrun. Gathered personal equipment. Ross moved slowly, his shoulder stiffening. Harper took one last look at the gun. The metal still radiated heat. Cordite residue coated every surface. The barrels showed stress marks visible even to untrained eyes. It had done its work. At 09:29, as the crew moved toward evacuation vehicles, Colonel Krauss received updated reports. British artillery fire from the troublesome sector had ceased. He verified with forward observers, confirmed. Silent. He didn't hesitate. Ordered immediate advance. His remaining 31 tanks, reduced from the morning's 48, rumbled forward. Harper heard the engines, turned. Watched the Panzer formation emerge from behind the ridge. Watched them advance across the killing ground his gun had dominated for 90 minutes. The mathematics shifted again, space and time, force and resistance, the elements that decided battles. He climbed into the evacuation lorry, the crew silent. Behind them, the guns. Ahead, uncertainty. But at 09:34, 5 minutes into the German advance, British forward observers detected the movement. The 20-minute artillery preparation Grimshaw had ordered at 08:45, anticipating exactly this moment, commenced. 16 batteries, 192 guns, synchronized fire. Not Harper's precision, mass instead. The doctrinal answer to armoured advance. The barrage descended, standard procedure, predictable, but overwhelming. Krauss's formation took immediate casualties. Panzers buttoned up, reduced visibility, slowed. The advance continued, but at half speed. The British had traded Harper's innovation for traditional firepower, different mathematics, similar results. At division headquarters, Major Becker noted the timeline. The troublesome British gun had ceased fire at 09:27. German advance had resumed at 09:29. British mass barrage had begun at 09:34, 5 minutes. The British had anticipated German response, prepared traditional countermeasures. The individual innovation had bought time for systemic response. He admired the efficiency. British command structure had observed Harper's methods, extracted maximum advantage, then reverted to doctrine when circumstances changed. Flexible thinking. That was dangerous, more dangerous than individual skill. Systems that could adapt, that could recognize innovation and exploit it, then return to tested methods. Those systems won wars. Krauss forced his advance through the barrage, lost another 8 tanks, reached the British infantry positions at 10:15, 2 hours behind schedule. The delay had allowed Montgomery's forces to strengthen defences. Krauss's attack stalled at the anti-tank ditches. By 11 SOS, he ordered withdrawal to original positions. The morning's operation had failed. Later he would file his after-action report, would mention the unusual British artillery pattern, would note the casualties. 17 tanks to the precise fire, 8 more to mass barrage. 25 total losses, 52% of his formation. Unacceptable. The operation had failed not because of British strength, but because of British adaptation. In the report's margin, someone at division headquarters wrote, "Note unexpected tactical variations in British artillery doctrine." Harper and his crew reached the assembly area at 10:30. Medical staff treated Ross's shoulder wound properly. MacLeod reported to Major Grimshaw. Harper cleaned his rifle, checked equipment. The routine actions soldiers perform after engagement. Staying busy, not thinking about the barrage continuing behind them, the muffled thunder of 192 guns maintaining sustained fire. At 11:15, word filtered through. The German advance had been repulsed. The ammunition convoy arrived 15 minutes later. Harper's gun remained forward, abandoned. Too dangerous to recover during active engagement. It would be retrieved later if the position held. If not, it would be destroyed per procedure to prevent capture. Grimshaw found Harper at 11:30, said nothing for a moment, just looked at the man, Aberdeen surveyor, 26 years old, slight build, weathered face, hands steady now, but showing the repetitive stress of sustained firing. 147 rounds in 93 minutes. "You're shooting this morning?" Grimshaw said finally. "Where'd you learn that pattern?" "Didn't learn it, sir. Just seemed right for the terrain." Grimshaw nodded. "You broke procedure?" "Aye, sir. Stopped a Panzer division." Harper said nothing. What was there to say? The mathematics spoke for themselves. 19 confirmed kills, 37% hit rate, 93 minutes, The numbers existed independent of intention or thought. There'll be questions, Grimshaw continued, after action review. They'll want to know how. They'll want to know why. They'll want to know if it can be repeated, standardized. Don't know if it can be, sir. Every terrain's different. That was the problem, Grimshaw realized, and also the answer. Doctrine provided. Standardization. But terrain didn't standardize. Circumstances didn't standardize. Sometimes warfare required adaptation, required someone to recognize that the manual didn't fit the moment. Get some rest, Harper. You're back on duty at 18:00. Harper saluted, walked away. Behind them, the guns continued firing. The war continued. By November 1942, the Battle of El Alamein had concluded. Montgomery's victory marked the turning point in the North African campaign. Rommel's forces withdrew across hundreds of kilometers. The British artillery had performed with exceptional effectiveness throughout the campaign. Official reports credited coordinated fire plans, superior logistics, numerical advantage. In a footnote to the 51st Highland Division's war diary, a clerk noted, 23rd of October, 0742.0920 hours. Individual firing adjustment by CPL J. Harper achieved 37% hit rate against armoured targets. Pattern analysed for potential incorporation into training protocols. The pattern was studied. Artillery schools at Larkhill examined Harper's firing solutions. The mathematics were sound, the adjustments logical, given the terrain. But attempts to standardise the approach failed. It required intuition as much as calculation, required the surveyor's understanding of ground and movement, required adaptation to specific circumstances. Doctrine resisted such variables. By 1943, Harper had been promoted to sergeant, served through Sicily, Italy, fired thousands more rounds, never achieved the same hit rate as that October morning. Neither did anyone else. The circumstances hadn't repeated. Different terrain, different tactics, different war. After demobilization in 1946, Harper returned to Aberdeen, resumed surveying, married, raised 3 children, never spoke much about the war. When asked, he mentioned serving in North Africa, Italy. When pressed for details, he shrugged. Artillery. Did my job. His family found his medals in a drawer after his death in 1987. Africa Star, Italy Star, War Medal, no special commendations, just the standard awards for service. In the same drawer, a photograph. Harper's gun crew, North Africa, 1942. 8 men around a 25-pounder, young faces, no names written on the back. The photograph stayed in the family. No one remembered the story. No one knew about the 93 minutes. The numbers existed only in archives now, filed, forgotten, except by military historians who occasionally found them, noted them, wondered about them. In 2003, a doctoral candidate at King's College London researched British artillery effectiveness during the Second World War. She examined after-action reports, war diaries, equipment logs, found the notation about Harper's firing pattern, found the statistics, 37% hit rate, 19 confirmed kills, 93 minutes, found the recommendation that the pattern be studied for incorporation into doctrine. She traced the subsequent analysis, found the artillery school reports from 1943, found the conclusion. Pattern dependent on specific terrain and tactical circumstances, individual adaptation necessary, not suitable for standardization. She understood what that meant. The military had recognized innovation but couldn't systematize it, couldn't reduce it to procedure. The pattern required judgment, intuition, real-time adaptation, required someone who understood both the mathematics and the ground, required Harper. Her dissertation chapter on tactical innovation included 3 paragraphs about that October morning. Footnoted properly, cited the archive references. No drama, no embellishment, just the numbers and their meaning. One man's adaptation had created tactical advantage. The system had benefited but couldn't replicate it. The dissertation was approved, published by a university press in 2005, sold 347 copies, mostly to academic libraries. The chapter on Harper was read by perhaps 24 researchers. They noted it. Some cited it in their own work. The numbers moved through scholarship. Small ripples in the historical record. In Aberdeen, Harper's family knew nothing of this. They had the photograph, the medals, the silence most veterans maintained about their service. The war had happened. They had survived. Life continued. That was enough. But in the archives, the numbers remained. October 23rd, 1942, 0742 to 0920. 19 German tanks destroyed by irregular firing pattern. 37% hit rate at 8 to 200 meters. 93 minutes that changed the tactical situation. Not enough to change the war. Just enough to matter that morning. Sometimes that's everything.